We're just over 30 days away from the elections in the East German states of Thuringia, Saxony, and 2 months away from the elections in Brandenburg. All three elections will be very important, not only for the states themselves, but also for Germany nationwide. It will be a test on the current political situation in each state, the incumbent parties in power, and also a test for the parties in the opposition. It will be an important signal for German politics going forward, especially for the kind of political situation within East Germany as a whole. Now, since we've finished the coverage of the European parliamentary elections and some of the recent general elections that happened in France and the UK, I want to bring the focus of the channel back on Germany. These will be very important elections. They were huge in 2019. It brought kind of international attention because of the rise of the AfD and the way that they were very competitive in a way that the German elections weren't in the past. And East Germany has a very different political dynamic than that of the West. East German states are entirely different from West German states. It's almost an entirely different country. The voting is different. The maps are completely different. And we can see here on the map for the European parliamentary election, the AfD won all 5 of the East German states, including large parts of East Berlin here in the middle, which, of course, the entire city itself went green. But you can see that there's a clear divide between the East and West. So these state elections will, of course, reflect that. So in this video, I want to give an overview, a recap of the way each of the states voted for the European Parliament election, and also look at the polls and see what they are showing for the statewide election for the Landtag. That will take place in September 1st for Thuringia and Saxony, and September 22nd for the state of Brandenburg. Now, if we look at the EU election results, we can see, of course, that the AfD won clearly in all 5 states. They were the most dominant party across the different parts of the region. In Thuringia, they won 30%, coming ahead 7 points of the CDU in second place, and the BSV, of the new party founded by Sarah Wagenknecht that split away from the left, was able to gain substantial amount of support in this region, tripling the support that Die Linke got in many of these places. And they were stronger both in the West and in the East. In the state of Saxony, the AfD won as well with around 31% of the vote, clearly ahead of the CDU, which was actually somewhat weaker here. The BSV got around 12% in this state. And in Brandenburg, it was somewhat different. Brandenburg, the SPD is slightly stronger. They were able to win 13%. This is not really a good result for them, but it is better than some of the other states. And this is because, of course, the incumbent governor of Brandenburg, Dietmar Woidke, is from the SPD. The SPD is stronger here than the other parts of Eastern Germany. And so you have a clear, more divide. The AfD is, of course, still in first place, slightly weaker, but then you have a divided field between the CDU, the BSV, and the SPD, kind of tying, all in second, third, and fourth. Now, these results were definitely a victory for the AfD. There were a lot of scandals and problems that affected the party, and that kind of seemed to tank a lot of the results in Western Germany. There was also the entrance of the BSV, which seemed to have taken away some of the votes, but nonetheless, the AfD not only won a lot of, won first place, they were able to drastically increase the amount of support they got from the last EU elections, increasing by 5 to 10 in a lot of districts. Now, if we take a look at each of the states, one thing that's important to note is that the EU election results is not necessarily a good way of reflecting on which way the states are going to vote for the Landtagswahl. And that is because these are different elections, there's different dynamics, there's different personalities, there's different, candidates, and so the results are not necessarily one-to-one, but it is kind of an important test to see the situation of the parties, and there's 2 important things to note. The first is that the AfD is the largest party in all 3 states in terms of the polling. However, the political makeup in all 3 is very different. For example, the incumbent governor in each of the 3 states is from a different party. In Brandenburg, it is someone from the SPD, in Saxony, the CDU, and in Thuringia, Die Linke. So the AfD is kind of going from the second largest party to the largest in all 3 states, but the incumbent party in power, the makeup of the state governments in each state is somewhat varies from state to state. So that will play a role in both the results and, of course, the government formation after we get the results in September. Now, if you take a look at the states, there is not too much of a fluctuation in the difference for the EU election results. This is, again, of course, because those incumbent governors, those personalities don't play as much of a role here. But the other important thing to note, the other important factor is that the smaller parties, the Greens, the FDP, and now, of course, Die Linke and the SPD are struggling to get above 5% in a lot of parts of Eastern Germany. We can see that the FDP clearly falls below in all 3 states. Die Linke Only one really above 5% in Thuringia because, of course, they have the incumbent governor there. But in Saxony and Brandenburg, they fell below. Even the SPD, was winning only 7% in Saxony. This is a state that historically, 150 years ago, they did very well in. And the SPD is still a very strong party in German politics, but they are not getting really the amount of vote they really should be. The Greens, of course, falling below in some. So there is a possibility that all of these four parties are struggling to reach the 5% threshold in some or potentially all of the states. Now, the EU election results were important, but of course I want to take a look now at the polls. There's one final thing to mention, and that is that the regional difference within the states does matter, and that is because within Brandenburg and Saxony, there of course is a rule that if a party receives direct mandates, they can win representation in the state parliaments. This was a kind of caveat in the Bundestag's election, and Die Linke used it actually in 2021. They won 3 direct mandates, and despite winning less than 5% of the vote, they were able to win proportional seats by winning 3 direct mandates. That has been removed from the Constitution. There were some legal challenges to it, but that is no longer really a part of German federal politics. But however, in the states of Brandenburg and Saxony, that is the case. And what this means is that in a state like Saxony, for example, if the Greens fall below 5%, they won't win seats. However, if they were able to win direct mandates in places like Dresden or in Leipzig, the major cities where they tend to do better, if they, I believe, win 2 direct mandates, they will win proportional seats. So if they win a direct mandate in Leipzig, a direct mandate in Dresden with 4% statewide, they will win those 2 seats plus some more seats for that 4% proportional that they wouldn't have gotten unless they win those direct mandates. And in Brandenburg, I believe it's also 1. So you could see parties like maybe and this really applies to only the Greens and SPD, but the Greens and SPD struggle in any of these states. They could rely on that. So the map does matter. The actual, candidacy does matter in some instances, but for the most part, that won't really play a role. But of course, I want to look now at the results for each of the states, and we're going to start off with the state of Thuringia. We see that the AFD clearly in the lead here by 6 points ahead of the CDU with 28%. The CDU coming in second with 22%, followed by the BSV with 20% and Die Linke at 12%. Now, what's important to note is the BSV is very strong here, and there's a number of reasons for this. One, Die Linke was very strong here, and now that the BSV has split away from Die Linke, they have a larger pool of voters to pull from. Also, this is Sarah Wagenknecht's home state. She is not a politically active here, but she was born in the state of Thuringia, so she has somewhat of a personal connection here, even though she's not the main candidate. The BSV is very strong here. They could potentially become the second largest party, so they have now kind of overtaken the position from Die Linke. They are the main left-wing party in the state. Die Linke, 12%, this is an abysmal result for them. This is the party of the incumbent governor. They got 31% in the last election. They were suffering, when the AFD was rising. The CDU has kind of positioned themselves as the moderate alternative to the AFD while being still an opposition party. So Die Linke, and then of course the BSV has come along and taken away some of the more working class voters. So Die Linke has been battered from all sides. And 12.7% is a good result in comparison to some of the other states where they're struggling to get above 5%. But nonetheless, this result for them is a disaster. This is a drop in over 20 points. And this is one of the states they were able to hold on because of Bodo Ramelow, their governor. But, coming 4th place, well, there's basically no chance of him maintaining his position of governor at that point. The Greens falling below 5%, like I said. There is now, 4 left-wing parties here. Very different, a lot of the issues, but they do kind of overlap on the, voters to some extent. And then, of course, you have, the AFD and the CDU. Now, in first and second place. Now, the possible coalitions that could be formed, no one really knows what could happen. The AFD has really no option, even if they become the largest party. The BSV, CDU, all parties have ruled out working with them. There is a potential for the CDU and BSV to work together. However, there is a lot of issues where they really do not just don't overlap, but are completely opposed to each other, especially foreign policy, the euro, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine. And this is also the case for the CDU and Die Linke. So it's going to be very problematic to form a government here. I think this state will be the hardest state to form any kind of government, but this is what the results show so far. If we take a look at Saxony, it's a very different picture. We see the AFD and the CDU are a lot stronger here. The AFD is the largest party, however, the CDU is a lot stronger in this state, and you see it's kind of a neck-and-neck tie between the two parties, and it is really not clear which will win first place. In the last election, they were kind of neck-and-neck as well. A lot of voters from the Greens and SPD ended up backing the CDU to make sure they maintained first place, and here again, we have a similar situation. Even if the AFD wins, they don't really have any coalition partners. So it's likely the CDU under their Governor Kretschmer, Michael Kretschmer, will retain the governorship, the minister-president position. However, the possible coalition is really not sure. If the CDU, Green, and SPD maintain a majority, then that's the current government, of course, will be re-elected. However, if the AFD and BSV win a majority, then it's going to be very hard for them to build new government. There might be some sort of minority government. It's possible that the CDU decides to work with the AFD. That's not totally out of the question. That could change. However, right as of now, I would say it's still very unlikely. The AFD has to probably win around 40% to get themselves into a position to demand that the CDU works for them and hope that there's kind of a divide within the party. However, there are pressures created. Of course, if the CDU is forced to work with the left-wing parties, that will kind of be a problem for them. Some of the more conservative voters will then split away to the AFD in future elections. So it is very strategic for all of the parties involved. And, of course, the last election is Brandenburg. Now, Brandenburg is, of course, very interesting because, like I said, Brandenburg, the incumbent governor, is from the SPD. That is why the SPD is a lot stronger here, whereas in the other states, they are very weak. And you can see that in these states, in a lot of East German state elections, and this is the case for many countries, the governor, the main figure, the head of the state, plays a very important role in these elections. And we can see that the parties' strength depends a lot more on who their leader is rather than the party's kind of ancestral support. Brandenburg, the SPD has been very strong, but they've collapsed in other elections. In the EU or federal elections right now, they're polling only around like 8 to 12%. But of course here, because they have the current governor, they have a stronger state association. They are at around 19%. This is not a great result for them. This is second place. This is a drop around 7 points. So when you compare it to other results, it looks good, but this is not a great result for them. For the CDU, this is actually an okay result, a very moderate result for them. Brandenburg has historically been a very left-wing state. The SPD and Die Linke were at one point tied at around 30%, being first and second. We see the BSV is, of course, very strong here, whereas Die Linke itself, which potentially had the chance to become the largest party in this state back in 2004 with their lead candidate Dagmar Enkelmann becoming governor, they are falling below 5%. This is a huge defeat for Die Linke. And, of course, if the BSV is able to push Die Linke below in a lot of the East German states, then it's going to be very hard for Die Linke to survive as a relevant political force in Germany. The Greens at around 7%. Like I said, they're potentially they could fall below 5%, but right now they are somewhat safe. Now the formation of a government in this state is somewhat similar. It's going to be very difficult. Even if the AFD wins first place, it's unlikely they will put forward a governor. They will build any kind of government. If the SPD, CDU, and Greens win a majority, that government will, of course, be reelected with the SPD. If they are the second largest party or the largest party amongst those putting forward their governor, if the CDU manages to overtake the SPD, then the CDU could put forward the governor. However, if the AFD and BSV win a majority, then it's going to be very hard to form a government, of course, as well. And so we will take a look at these results and see kind of what happens as the month goes on. So I wanted to give you guys kind of an update of the situation. I know it's been a bit since I've done a video, but now we have, the campaign is underway for these 3 elections. It will be very important, all of the results. And I will do more videos focusing on each state individually, maybe doing a recap of the 2019 elections in each state, talking about the popularities of the governor, talking about them more as individuals, and also the AFD's lead candidate, who each party wants to put forward in the governorship position. And so I'll definitely do some more videos as we get closer. And of course, later on this year, we will be talking about the Austrian elections. There is a general election and 2 state elections in Austria, and those will be covered as well. So I hope everyone likes this video. If you do, please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you all for watching.